Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to our Nishcast podcast coming at you on 16th of November, fresh after the Blackcaps were knocked out of the Cricket World Cup, losing to India in the semi-final. All good, we'll chat a bit about that in a jiffy, but we also have a lot of Aotearoa sporting action to talk about on today's podcast. We've got a bit of Plunket Shield. We've got Halliburton-Johnston Shield, women's one-day cricket starting this weekend. We've got an all-whites game. They play against Greece, which I think is Saturday morning if I've got my dates correct, which will be an interesting old game. All-whites footy is back. We've got two Wellington Phoenix games as per the weekly rotation. We've also got Flying Kiwis in action around the world that we'll touch on, and we may even do a little bit more National League kōrero as well for you football freaks. Most of which you can read about on our website, theniche-case.com. The Blackcaps, they'll soon start a test series against Bangladesh, the first of their World Test Championship campaign, and there's a preview there on our website all ready to go. We've got the Kiwi-NRL train and trial contract breakdown, as well as a whole lot of Kiwi-NRL junior information. I'll be writing about Halliburton-Johnston Shield every Monday or Tuesday, recapping the weekend's action, so make sure you're tuned into our website. There'll be a Plunket Shield deep dive coming up. Flying Kiwis weekly recap is live, as well as both National League weekend roundy reviews. You did mention that you're going to do something about the New Zealand Breakers last week. Is that still on the hoist?
There is a draft going. I have I was going to say a Word document, but I don't use Word documents anymore because they keep telling me to pay for it. So I use LibreOffice, nice free open source one. I have a LibreOffice document in the works, one of several of articles that I got on the go. That one is, at some point that'll happen.
Beauty. So you should check it out if you're a fan of Aotearoa basketball, but also let's get old mate upgraded to some Microsoft Office. I don't actually use much Microsoft Office myself. Got the old Windows Notepad, which goes completely fine for myself. But if you would like to help us upgrade our technological capacities, because we're balling on a budget here, you can head on over to the website, theniche-case.com. You can have a gaze at any of the ads that run on the website. You can also subscribe on YouTube, help us build up our YouTube, and you can support the Niche Case directly through Patreon or a paid Substack subscription. Let's hold that thought for a jiffy because we've got a few things to get out of the way. Let's start with mindfulness. What do you got for mindfulness?
For mindfulness today, and probably a good one to start with in light of the Blackcaps losing a World Cup semi-final. Very simple words. One thing said it was from Eckhart Tolle, but it also looked like maybe he was quoting someone else, so I don't know. So I'll just say anonymous. It's a sort of not vague, a universal enough one that it doesn't need to be attributed. Three simple words: accept, then act.
Roger Dodger. We accept and we act. You can't act, or when you do act from a place of, I don't know what the opposite of acceptance is, when it's like more control and a lot of the more male masculine tendencies of control and ego and fear, and I don't know what the opposite of acceptance is. I'm kind of waffling on to let my brain figure it out, but I don't know. When you do act from the opposite of acceptance, those actions get a bit iffy. They get a bit wonky. They're out of alignment. So you need to accept whatever has happened first and foremost before taking a little break, taking a little moment of pause, and then hitting your take action.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of different versions of non-acceptance. Like, I think that takes a lot of different forms, which is why it's hard to describe. But if you just think about it as like a general confusion, I mean, there's a lack of acceptance because you're not willing to accept what the reality is. There's also a lack of acceptance because you don't yet know what it is, or you haven't had time to process it, or whatever. All of these situations where you're probably not in the best position to be making wise decisions, and even if trying to slog through that, you're not going to be making them from a consistent place, like with your 2 feet on the ground kind of, this is consistent with my character kind of stuff. And that seems like it's probably not the most effective way to go about operating your day-to-day life.
We've also got musical jams scheduled in. There are 5 fresh Aotearoa music videos on our website, the Lounge page. You can check in with some local tunes. We've got our monthly jukebox from October. That's live. We're always big upping Aotearoa music, and I'm listening to the latest drop from Christoph El Truento. It's called Circle of Friends. A couple of guest features, some of those Circle of Friends, you've got Tom Scott rapping about gentrification and how the white cells don't integrate with the other cells, which is very interesting to listen to and very logical, a lot of common sense outlined there. You've also got Lady 6 featuring on Drip, but this is 9 tracks of glorious Aotearoa, jazzy, dubby, rootsy, cool, funky music from Christoph El Truento. Check that out. Where Did We Go Wrong? You can probably jam it on Bandcamp and or buy it. I go through YouTube, and you can go to Christoph El Truento, The Topic, and he's got that full project there as well. What have you been listening to, Chief? Chiefin?
Well,
You been
Chieftain. Chris Stapleton's new album is typically excellent Chris Stapleton sort of songcraft stuff. So I have been working through that a few times. There's a song on that called White Horse, which is an absolute ripper. But that's some Tennessee music. Moving closer to home, there is a new album from Mermaidens and a new album from Ernie Bell, which both of them have been on high rotation as well. Mermaidens, absolutely love them, one of my favorite Kiwi bands. Sort of I don't know, like a kind of psychedelic shoegazy kind of indie rock, just somewhere along those kind of intersections. Whereas Ernie Bell is a bit more slower, folksier. It's almost kind of like, I don't know. She just her stuff has kind of like an exotic feel to it in a weird way. That'll make more sense when people listen to it and hear what I'm talking about. But those 2 albums, great, from a couple of Kiwi artists who've been doing good things. Also, I don't know if you're planning on listening to the upcoming Andre 3000 flute album that's been announced, coming out tomorrow, I believe. It sounds like it's just a jazz thing. He says he doesn't rap on it, so I can't lie and say I'm not curious.
Yeah, we might give it a twirl. I enjoyed the Alchemist Flying High Part 2. If you go, there's a music video for his song with Gangrene. Let me get the actual name of it here. He's got the Nothing Is Freestyle, which is the Alchemist rapping, which is pretty cool to see. He's pretty talented with the old raps, with the old production as well. And then if you check out Royal Hand featuring Gangrene, that's an absolute banger as well. And we'll see what old Andre 3 Stacks is up to with his new album. Yesterday we recorded our subscriber podcast. We went deep into Kiwi-NRL juniors and New Zealand Warriors kind of contracting layers. So there's a lot of information there. We talked about it, but the dispatch via Patreon and the paid Substack post, it included notes about the Kiwi-NRL juniors, so just a whole bunch of names for the rugby league fans from Aotearoa to check in with. as well as breaking down some New Zealand Warriors contract layers, the best of basically what we know for certain and what we don't know, because there's a lot we don't know as far as NRL contract status goes. But what we're doing at the moment is including a lot of notes and nuggets. Nico the Wildcard has included National League stats as well. So yesterday in our subscriber podcast, we talked about Kiwi-NRL juniors and New Zealand Warriors contracts. We did talk about the big donnies, because we talked about how the Warriors are investing a lot of money in a few big donnies and some of that salary cap management. We also talked the best players in the National League, but it wasn't just a podcast, because every week we also send out notes that you can check in with and make sure you're on top of the topics we're talking about. We basically share our work through Patreon and the Substack posts. You can sign up to Patreon, patreon.com/EL Nishkesh, and Substack. There is a paid option. You don't need to do a paid option to get our Monday and Friday free newsletter. That's all good. Just sign up. And then we also send out our subscriber podcast for the paid Substack subscribers as well. One thing I did touch on, I think it was last week in the news, that I did highlight a few Kiwi-NRL halves, juniors from Aotearoa who are in Australia or assigned to NRL teams in playmaking positions. And on the back of our subscriber podcast yesterday, I did expand on my list of young playmakers from Aotearoa who I am interested in and I am tracking, because as we know, Aotearoa has no issues producing big boppers. We got no issues producing edge forwards, no issues producing outside backs. Traditionally, Aotearoa has struggled to produce playmakers and halves. Now, to go with the train and trial information, the best young big boppers, and everything I talk about for Kiwi-NRL stuff, the playmaker thing is also a sign of Aotearoa producing better rugby league talent than Australia. So this is just another example. And I did query whether Oliver Lowry was still with the Tigers in our subscriber podcast. I have gone to the Tigers website and I have spotted Oliver Lowry in their preseason training. He's a half from Christchurch. But he's not the only half from Christchurch in the junior ranks over in Australia. You got Bronson Rubin, who's I think he was playing Harold Matthews last year for the Bulldogs. I think he's from, might be the Northern Bulldogs, which is a rugby league club in the northern areas of Christchurch, Canterbury. But he's a young half from Christchurch rising up the Bulldog system. And then you've also got Eli Bijil Kakoi, who's a Linwood junior, and he's going to be playing footy for North Devils. I don't know if he's affiliated to an NRL club, but he was in the, I think he was in the St. Thomas of Canterbury team who won the secondary schools competition last year. Now he's gone over to Australia and he's in the North Devils. I think it's the Mal Meninga Cup squad. So right there, we got 3 young halves in Australian systems only from Christchurch. That is rather impressive. Other lads, other playmakers that I'm interested in. I've mentioned Ryder Williams. He's got a development contract with the Titans. He's a Marist junior from Auckland. 17 years old with a development contract. Praise Jah. The Roosters, Cassius Tia. He's one of the best playmakers in the Roosters system. Another Marist junior who he started in SG Ball. He played a bit of New South Wales Cup. But he was the starting half in the Jersey Flag final for the Roosters. He's really good. Mentioned John Whinianga Nofo. He is capable of playing any position, I reckon, on a rugby league field. But he did play a bit of halves for the Dolphins this year. He's from Auckland Grammar First 15. He's in the Dolphins system. The Warriors, we've got Sefania Kauli Lupo, Franklin Mano Malmea, and William Piliu. They all played SG Ball, and all of them finished this year playing against men, either in Fox Memorial or the New Zealand Rugby League National Premiership. General rule of thumb, if you're a youngster and you're playing against men, that's pretty good. So I'll be interested in how they progress through the Warriors system. They could transition to New South Wales Cup, but they could also slot into that Jersey Flag squad. The Warriors also might have Maui Winatana Patalesio. He is from Wellington, and he is featured in a few Warriors junior stuff as well. So I'm curious to see if he pops up in the SG Ball team or Jersey Flag. We'll keep track of that. The Bulldogs also had Mariki Aumua, who's from the Manawatu. He was their SG Ball half. The Knights, they've got Hami Loza, who he might have been from Rotorua to start with. Then he's popped up with Otara and Mangere East. He was Harold Matthews last year with the Knights under 17. He's probably going to be in their SG Ball squad. He's a half. Along with Bijul Kakoi, you've got Armani Wetini Naropo. He's with Burley, and Mason Barber is with Tweed. I don't have any strong affiliation with an NRL club. They're all in the Burley and Tweed are in the Titans area, but there's a lot of changes happening with the pathways in that region. So you got Wetini Naropo, he's a Manurewa junior. Mason Barber's from the Hokianga as well. So good spread across Aotearoa here. Those three, Wetini Naropo, Bijil Kakoi, and Barber, they're all going to be playing under 19 Malmaninga Cup this year, and I'll be curious to see if they're starting halves or what's happening there. But as you might have guessed, that's a lot of young halves, and they're all from different pockets of Aotearoa, and you've got others like Ryder Crosswell, who's from the Manawatu, who is apparently signed to the Knights. So he might pop up in Knights teams next year. Ashton Woodhouse Denton, another, I think he's a Manurewa junior. He's signed to the Warriors. And of course, we'll keep learning because the Warriors haven't named their SG Ball Jersey Flag squads just yet, let alone Harold Matthews under 17. So I will be fascinated to see what happens there. And I will relay my fascination through podcasts, through the newsletter, and maybe through the subscriber podcast over the summer as well, where it suits. There's a lot of halves there. A lot more halves than we've traditionally had, and they're all like 3 from Christchurch, couple from Manawatu, Mason Barber from the Hokianga. They're coming from all around Aotearoa, and this is another reason why I believe Aotearoa is producing better rugby league talent than Australia right now.
Beauty. Particularly loving this this rise in Christchurch rugby league lately. The last couple of years. This is a good thing because it's often been like the South Island didn't get the same kind of I don't know what you call it, like just inroads in the Kiwi League takeover stuff, but then suddenly like all this, you get just a couple of pathways going, and then it's like the dams have busted. I don't know if I've mentioned on the podcast before, but the Wellington Phoenix women's team as well, curiously, just something that it reminded me of, is like 40% made up of Canterbury footballers. There's more Canterbury players than there are Wellington players in the Phoenix women. Annalie Longo, obviously, Macy Fraser, Waimakariri Jr., Soik McMeekin, Kate Taylor, Marissa Vandermeer, etc., etc. Like there's 3 or 4 others on top of that. On top of also Canterbury has the Super Rugby team that wins every single year, and now there's the Canterbury dude who's going to be coaching the All Blacks. And just Canterbury sports seems to be going all right, and they're getting a new stadium too. I'm told.
What do we always say about Canterbury cricket?
Of course, best seamers going around for starters. Some of the best young talent, full stop. Couple with best young wicketkeeper coming through. One of the best opening bats, there's no shortage.
Also, in our newsletter, might drop a couple of notes, just provide that information as part of our newsletter about the Kiwi-NRL Playmakers. I'll be updating the Women's Big Bash League because that is continuing to take place over in Australia. We got games tonight, tomorrow. Sophie Devine versus Susie Bates tonight. And then you got Amelia Kerr playing for the Heat tomorrow. Those games are continuing to flow. The ladder's quite interesting because you got Sophie Devine and Amelia Kerr. They are both on 14 points. Scorchers and Heat. They are both on 14 points. Scorchers are first via net run rate. Heat are third. And then you've got Susie Bates and Jess Kerr, who hasn't played in a few games for the Sixers. They are fifth on 10 points. So the Sixers are trying to get into finals, and you've got the Scorchers and Heat, Amelia Kerr, Sophie Devine, holding down the top of the Women's Big Bash League ladder. You also mentioned Tara Reid, one of the tall ferns competing in the Australian Women's NBL. You mentioned a pretty crazy stat to start her campaign that you dropped in our Monday newsletter. Can you repeat that stat for Tara Reid, tall fern competing in the Women's NBL in Australia?
Yeah, not just in the email did I mention it, but also went and found the video clips of the 8 field goals in question and chucked that up on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah, Tall Ferns wing, Kenny Tara Reid coming, one of the best Kiwi college careers. I can't remember where she was because I don't follow the college stuff that closely, but she had one of the better, careers. I think she's third all-time Div 1 leading scorer for New Zealand players, which I don't think is gonna. I think she'll be within a couple of weeks. She'll be down to fourth because Charlie Sledger Walker is coming for that first place, and that's happening very quickly now that her season is up and running again. But Tara Reid has played, I think, 2 seasons of Taui'i, and then had a little bit of a stint in Europe somewhere like Sweden or Finland or something like that, which is probably more like semi-pro basketball. But after the latest Taui'i season, she's gone to sign with the Melbourne Boomers to be teammates with Penina Davidson over there for a contending team. Like, that's a good. They've won their first 3 games in a row. They're looking like one of the. They did actually win it 2 years ago, so this isn't a surprise. But they're looking like one of the best teams. And within that, WBBL rookie Tara Reid started all 3 games. She has shot 8 out of 10 from 3-point range. It's 80%. That's not even a hard one to work out. Normally you have to get the calculator for those 3-point percentages. Here it's just nice and easy. 8 out of 10, 80%. Of course, it's only 3 games, but it's pretty astonishing. Like, there's no one who's made as many. I think she's equal for making the most 3-pointers to start the season, and there's no one who's attempted as many as her with anything close to the same success rate. So yeah, on top of the fact she's also averaging 14 points. Oh, so I think it's more than that. I think she went up. So she goes 19 in their most recent game. So I think it's now 15.5 points and 8 rebounds per game, chipping in with steals, playing good defense, good sort of role playing part of the Boomers offense there, hitting some catch and shoots, but also getting layups and passing the ball around nicely. Pretty outstanding start to a WNBL career right there.
And Kiwi basketball fans don't need to worry. She's not playing for the Australian Boomers. It is just the Melbourne Boomers. She's still a hearty, tall fan from Aotearoa. Last night, we did have the Blackcaps losing to India. And to be honest, as soon as Rohit Sharma started whacking boundaries, I was like, I'm over this World Cup.
Yeah.
I'm just over it.
The whole thing?
Yep, the whole thing. It sucks. And that's the extent of my Blackcaps analysis. I will big up myself because Devon Conway and Tom Latham didn't score runs and the Blackcaps lost. However, Tim Southey did take a few wickets, although he was, somewhat targeted.
He went for 10 and over, so triple figures.
Maybe my Blackcaps analysis was fair. Like, Tim Southey was targeted, and the Blackcaps lost with no runs from Devon Conway or Tom Latham. I do have one insight, though, apart from being over the World Cup, really early in that game. And then pondering, actually, it's kind of cool that the Bangladesh Test Series is happening straight after, because we can flush the dunny and move on into what will be a very exciting Test Series, I believe, because I think the Blackcaps can win that Test Series in Bangladesh. No Shakib Al Hassan, hopefully. I think Daryl Mitchell is the second best batter in the team. and Blackcaps cricket, New Zealand cricket. I have Daryl Mitchell overtaking Devon Conway as the second best batter in the team. Like, Kane Williamson is an absolute monster. As like you can highlight Joe Root, Virat Kohli, all these other batters around the world literally play 3 times as much cricket as Kane Williamson. So they are always going to have more runs. They're always going to have more eye-catching production and stats. So it's like, oh, who scored the most runs this year? Well, yeah, you're playing 300 games this year, no surprises. Who scored the most test runs? Well, England plays literally 3 times as many tests as some other nations. It is crazy. But Kane Williamson is incredibly effective, incredibly efficient with his run scoring, and he's still doing that. Like, this World Cup was fantastic for Kane Williamson. This year has been fantastic for Kane Williamson in tests and ODIs. And then there's Daryl Mitchell, who I reckon is he's the second best batter in Aotearoa cricket right now. You can look at his test run scoring. I think he averages over. Can you just pull up Daryl Mitchell's batting averages while I'm talking?
I can, but I can tell you as I look it up that I'm pretty sure he is the only New Zealander who averages over 50 in 2 different formats.
That is
with like a benchmark of innings. Obviously, we're not counting people who've only batted twice or whatever.
Yeah, that's Daz Mitchell right there. But you're seeing the way he bats in white ball cricket, he just comes out and he can smash it. But he's also a very effective test batter, as evident in his test batting average, which you might have.
Which I do have somewhere here. His test batting average is 57.21. That's from 27 innings, 18 tests, 1,316 runs. ODIs, he's got 1,577 at an average of 52.56. He's also got 1,000 runs in T20s, but average of 24.8. No one averages 50 in T20s unless you're Virat Kohli. So
everything you're seeing about Daryl Mitchell in white ball cricket, him coming out and banging sixes, banging boundaries, scoring a lot of runs, great average. Well, he also averages 57 in test cricket, like there's a bit of hard grit, hard mahi right there. So big up Daryl Mitchell, second best batter for Aotearoa. Is there anything you want to say about the Blackcaps World Cup campaign?
We'll add this on Daryl Mitchell, 6 ODI hundreds and 5 50s. So when he gets to 50, more than half the time he carries that on into a big score. And he did that again in a World Cup semi-final. And you know what the thing I thought about watching him, because we've seen this from him before. You don't get an average above 50 by only every now and then doing cool things. Like this type of innings is just standard Daryl Mitchell. He does this all the time. So the style wasn't fresh, but the occasion was. It was a World Cup semi-final against India in India. It was absolutely massive. Like, it doesn't get tougher than that. And he had one of the best innings of his career. And you think about when they were in England the other year and getting absolutely tonked in the original baseball series. Him and Tom Blunder were just like coming in at 90 for 5 or whatever, having a big partnership every single innings. Like, those guys in a series that we were getting dominated in, Daryl Mitchell was just scoring hundreds for fun. And I remember the semi-final of the World T20 a couple times ago when we beat England. He had a big innings in that one. He's a big game player, and all the talent in the world doesn't necessarily guarantee you that like anyone who plays in a World Cup semi-final is a great cricketer and is capable of doing something amazing. Daryl Mitchell, you trust he's going to do it because he just was on top of the talent. And arguably there's far more talented players that were playing in that game around him, but he just has this, like, I don't know, the mentality. I guess having a sort of high performance mindset running in the family, his dad being an ex All Blacks coach, probably helps that. Like, this is an actual tangible way in which that would have benefited his cricketing career, is that he's just not. He's almost I guess the other factor of that is also mean he grew up in Australia for a section of his cricketing development as a teenager. So he almost has an Australian mentality. When it's like the going gets tough, he steps up, rises to the occasion in a way where it's like, of course I'm going to do this. Of course I'm going to come out and smack sixes off these Indian spinners through the middle overs. When at any point, if we lose another wicket, this is basically game over. He just, I don't. It was just astonishing to watch that, and I watched basically the whole game. So I'm working on like 2 hours sleep here. So forgive me if my ramblings get even more rambling than usual, but that was definitely something that stuck from watching Daryl Mitchell. Is just the big game mentality that he has, and just the ability to rise to the occasion, and such a difficult occasion. That is rare. Like, that is a very rare thing, and that is why he has been so effective as a Blackcaps batsman in all formats over the last 2-3 years or whatever it is.
Any kind of sharp takeaways from the game or just the World Cup campaign in general?
Well, I'll say this about the game, because I agree. Once Rohit Sharma started teeing off, even though they got him relatively soon-ish, once Sharma started teeing off and we didn't get 2 to 3 to 4 wickets in the first power play, it was like, well, there's no stopping them now. Like, there's no stopping them from getting a big score, and we're just going to have to hope for a miracle to chase it. And the chase was pretty good. Like, the partnership between Williamson and Mitchell started a little bit slow, but it started slow because it was in tricky conditions. But they got it close. It's just they couldn't kick on once India started going into death bowling mode in the last power play, which, so it goes, it's the best bowling lineup in the world on top of the best batting lineup in the world in their favorable conditions. What are you going to do? But I'll say this: like, they kept it close. They got a lot closer than more or less anyone else would have done. And I think a major reason why they kept it close is the same theme that we've been touching on throughout this entire tournament. That is extras. There was definitely a point there where India were way ahead of the game. Like, Blackcaps they're sitting at a place where they still needed like 10 plus and over for another 25 overs. And India was showing some signs of crack in there. There was like frustration in the field. There were misfields. Williamson got dropped an absolute sitter at one point. There was an over where Ravi Jadeja bowled beautifully, only goes for 3 runs, and then off the last ball decides to try throw down the stumps and gives away 4 overthrows. Like, there's a run out where the keeper Rahul takes the bails off with his gloves instead. Like, little things like this, inefficiencies, and also throughout it, there were wides and there were leg byes that were sneaking away for 4. And just, I think the Blackcaps conceded 380 odd and had 8 extras in that India innings. They lost by 70 runs, and I think India gave up 28 extras. I think it was close to 30. It was a massive differential.
29 extras from India and 8 extras from the Blackcaps.
There you go. And that literally kept the game close for quite a while, just keeping them chipping away, as it's been all tournament long. Blackcaps winning that extras battle.
It is a interesting thing to cling on to when you lose. When you lose, you can always, for the Blackcaps, it is big up extras. We do win the extras battle, and that is like the cricketing equivalent of we'll lose the game, but we'll win the fight. That's more of a rugby league thing. We'll lose the game, but we'll win the scrap. Cricket, especially Blackcaps cricket, we'll lose the game, but we'll win the extras battle for sure. Like, that is the epitome of Blackcaps cricket.
Yeah, but also if they hadn't lost the game by some miracle, those extras would have been the difference. Like, it kept the game alive for longer than it needed to, and you could see ways in which the Indian players, including the captain, was getting a little bit frisky with that for a while, even though they were miles ahead of the game. And literally what it took was massive partnership between Williamson and Mitchell just to give any hint of a chance. And as soon as Williamson got out, it was basically game over. So Latham comes in, gets out 2 balls later. At that point, Daryl Mitchell's been batting for more than an hour and looks absolutely exhausted. He's been treated for cramp and is um, just see the ball, whack the ball the way he was when he was fresh at the start of his innings. Glenn Phillips had a nice little, he took a while to get started, but then he had a couple, he had a few big ones and kept things going. But then he gets caught on the boundary, and it wasn't going to happen from that point. But they kept it closer than most would. Really, the batting innings was not what blew it for them. It was the fact they gave up nearly 400 runs with the ball. And maybe, just maybe, only picking 4 frontline bowlers wasn't the best idea. I kind of felt this way all along. There's games where they win and it doesn't matter. And then also you're still stacking an extra batter. So it's a little bit of short blanket syndrome. Like, you can't have both. You either have to be short on batting or short on bowling. And they've tended towards the batting, which meant that it is a sort of tacit acceptance that their plan to win games was to be able to chase big scores or set big scores. They weren't playing to try have a 250 kind of game the way the last semi-final against India was. You just can't give up that many runs. We scored 400 against Pakistan earlier in this tournament and didn't win. Although the way that innings worked against India, where the Blackcaps were behind the run rate, but were still in a position enough to be able to put pressure back on India, chasing a similar total, and then the way it crumbled with just the loss of 1 wicket is a pretty good example of why the DRS wasn't, not DRS, the DLS, Duckworth, Lewis and Steve, wasn't entirely fair in how it worked for such a big total and such a big chase in that game. So, but ultimately, it's very hard to have complaints about the Blackcaps just losing to the best team in the world in their own conditions when they've so clearly been better than everyone else throughout this tournament. And frankly, the 2 closest games they might have had, probably the 2 games they played against New Zealand. We'll see what happens in the final, but I kind of don't think Australia or South Africa can push them to a further extent. They might be able to do similar to what the Blackcaps did, but I don't know that they could go further. However, I am still lingering that one idea of like, how much would have been different if Michael Bracewell had been there? We'll never know, but it was definitely a lingering thought throughout a lot of that game, bat and ball, just how much of a beneficial presence he might have been to that team.
I'm kind of at a point where it's like the Blackcaps' clear weakness was their bowling, because
for sure,
they conceded a lot of runs throughout the tournament. They weren't that effective taking wickets. Matt Henry was a notable omission at some point as well, so that's a factor. There was a lot of injury niggle, but the weakness in this team was their bowling and their inability to restrict runs and take wickets. But even then, it's kind of harsh because what's happening at this World Cup in India. 400 seems like a consistent target. So I don't think that is necessarily a specific, unique weakness for the Blackcaps. There's a lot of other teams who struggle to contain these teams at the World Cup. We've also got Plunket Shield happening. Round 4, the last round, I think, of Plunket Shield, first stanza. We had Brett Randall and Blair Tickner taking wickets to dismiss Canterbury for 225. Central Stags 31 without loss, so they're responding pretty nicely. We've got Auckland have Will O'Donnell and Sean Solier both hit centuries to start that game. That's a home game for Auckland, so Auckland are finally doing some good things in home conditions, most notably scoring runs. But now they've lost 3 wickets, and I think they lost Will O'Donnell yesterday, but this morning Nathan Smith, who wasn't doing a whole lot to start that innings, again, openers Will O'Donnell and Sean Solier both at centuries, but this morning Nathan Smith has taken 2 wickets, including the wicket of Finn Allen, which I am going to watch right now and talk through it. Nathan Smith trundles in, outside off. Guess what Finn Allen does? He has a big swing, he gets a little ding, and it is caught by Callum McLaughlin, the wicketkeeper. So interesting to see what happens there, how Auckland kick on from the strong position. And then you had Otago Volts. They rolled Northern Districts for 111, and they are now 222 for 6. What I found interesting there, we talked about this, I think it might have been on Tuesday or the Subscriber podcast. Well, first of all, shout out Jacob Duffy. He took 3 wickets. Luke Georgeson took 4 wickets, and I don't think I'm not as high on Luke Georgeson as I am Zach Folks, but they have the same skill set. Well, slightly different, because Luke Georgeson is actually a certified opener for Otago, and he bowls good medium pace, whereas Zach Folks is just a really good all-rounder who did a job as an opener before dropping back down the order. But Luke Georgeson took 4 wickets, and then he didn't open the batting in this game, though, so he's got maybe him and Zach Folks are just very similar cricketers. Good all-rounders, good batters, good bowlers. Luke Georgeson, he took a nice 4-wicket haul, but Northern Districts, Matt Fisher's out for this game. Good young seamer, bowls pretty quick, has taken a lot of wickets. They also, with the inclusion of Neil Wagner, Christian Clark has dropped down to 12th man, as we said, after taking his second 6-wicket haul of the season. So Northern Districts, no Matt Fisher, no Christian Clark, but they do have Brett Hampton, who he's making a habit of banging boundaries down the order and nibbling the ball all sorts of ways. So he is a really interesting cricketer. I think Josh Clarkson's probably a better batter than Brett Hampton, and Brett Hampton's probably a better bowler than Josh Clarkson. But they are 2 slightly older lads who are power hitters and as all-rounders. Luke Georgeson, Zach Folks, they're a bit younger, but they're more good, classy batters and all-rounders. Hampton's actually got 6 wickets now, so he is tearing through this Otago lineup, and he is a really interesting cricketer to watch out for in white ball cricket, because he's going to whack boundaries, he's going to take wickets, and it's going to be interesting to see how these games pan out. So we'll stay tuned. We've got lots of clips, lots of wickets, lots of runs on our social media. And of course, there will be the deep dive coming up. Halliburton Johnston Shield, as I said, starts this weekend. Games on Saturday and Sunday. We have to see who is named to play and how they perform. I'm fascinated by women's cricket this summer because, as we know, the White Ferns ignore domestic cricket. There is no correlation between domestic cricket and White Ferns selection, White Ferns performances, which only makes domestic cricket more interesting because it can swing things either way. We can either say, oh, things are changing with the White Ferns. They're actually paying respect to domestic cricket and the best performers in domestic cricket. Or we can say, well, the best domestic cricketers are still being ignored by the White Ferns and the White Ferns are still losing. So really interesting summer for women's cricket in Aotearoa, and obviously the Niche Cage will be all over that, as we will be all over All Whites versus Greece. I believe this game is behind closed doors in Athens at the request of Greece football folks. So shout out to them. The All Whites, you did mention that we've got a bit of Chris Wood. He's in the mix. You did highlight some injury issues there. What are you making of Chris Wood's inclusion in the squad, and how are you feeling? Like, just set the tone, set the context for this game against Greece, because it will be quickly followed 4 days later against Ireland.
Yeah, it will. We'll be able to podcast in between and recap that Greece one, and then talk through that, ideas into the Ireland one. So I guess we can just focus on the Greece one first. I was worried. I was worried when they picked Chris Wood and also Sarpreet Singh, both under injury clouds.
Yeah, so you've taken that route. Sorry to interrupt. You've taken that route a few times. I'm like, well, just bring them in. Like, if they're injured and they're not going to play, it's all good. Just bring them into camp. That's not an issue. You seem to put a greater weight on that move than I do.
Not specifically this one. Just the fact that it happens with someone every single time. The Either the All Whites or football ferns. It's just a trend that I've noticed too many times to ignore at this point. The football ferns are a little bit worse for it because they also, and I like, yeah, I it's tricky because you get, it's not just the players who turn up injured and then it's like, yeah, bring them in, see how they go. It's also the little injuries that are picked up during the tour, and then oh well, we won't replace them because it costs money to bring in someone else, but we're also not going to risk them because their club stuff is important and blah blah blah, and then you just end up going under strength into these games with two teams that can't necessarily absorb the loss of some of their key players. All Whites are getting a little bit better than that. I think the Football Ferns, Football Ferns just announced new games. They're going to play in Colombia in the next transfer window, in the next international window, which is very like first week of December, which is great because they said they were going to play in that window and then nothing was announced. And I got to the point where I was like, well, we're 2 weeks out. I guess that's not happening. But no, I guess it is happening after all. They're going to play some games against Colombia. And with some of the players who are emerging, particularly in the A-League, but not only in the A-League, from outside of the squad that went to the World Cup, it's actually something I wrote about in, I think, the Monday email. I'm quite excited to see what that looks like now, because I think there is suddenly a level of depth that the Ferns haven't had before, which the All Whites have started to get to. So, yeah, nonetheless, I was still a little bit worried about Chris Wood and Southbridge Singh coming in injured. Not as much for them taking up spots that could have been used for someone else, because I think those are the two players who certainly, like, at that level of importance, you take the risk. I like accept that. You just got to go for it because they're too important to the team if they are available. But
there's no risk.
Sorry,
there's no risk. You're selecting them.
The risk is they don't play.
But that's not a risk. That is, yeah, you're in camp. You're with the boys. You're elevating the All Whites program by being there. Like, you don't need to play.
The All Whites don't score a lot of goals, so they kind of,
yeah. But
like, I guess maybe risk is the wrong word. It's not about whether they're there. It's just about whether they play or not makes a difference to how good the All Whites are going to be.
But like, you can for the culture of the team, for them as leaders of the All Whites, if they're available to travel, even if like they're not playing, you want them there. You want them involved.
Yeah, of course, but also if they're not available to play, you would like to pick someone else as well to have those guys as traveling members, or just have an extended squad. These are things that they might be able to do that they don't tend to. But that's not the important part. The important part here is just that they're key players and they were brought in under injury clouds, but Chris Wood, ahead of schedule, got about a dozen minutes off the bench for Nottingham Forest against West Ham on the weekend. So I wasn't expecting that to happen, but it did, which means that I guess he's fine. If they're bringing him back, then he always must be able to expect at least something out of him. If not a start, then at least give us 30 minutes off the bench, see how she goes. And Sarpreet Singh, while he didn't play for Hansa Rostock, he was on their bench for the first time since the last international window. He hadn't played at all since the All Whites game against Congo, where he was maybe the best player on the field, having not played much at all before that either. So he's probably got a little bit less to risk because he hasn't really established himself at Hansa Rostock yet. So he's not really a guy who's going to get injured and lose his place. He doesn't have a starting place to lose. He doesn't often even feature off the bench. He's done a lot of unused sub stuff this year. Chris Wood does have a role. It's not a starting role, but he is a guy who gets 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes off the bench pretty much every game for Nottingham Forest. So he does have something to lose, but he's also further ahead. He's in his recovery. He played on the weekend. So good signs. Like we can wipe the sweat off the brow there. It's big sigh of relief. So both those two guys seem like they should be fit and available and ready to go for the All Whites. And if they're playing, prospects change significantly because those guys, one is a proven creator, one is a proven finisher. The two most difficult things to procure in international football, and these are the two guys who are the best at it within this All Whites environment. And hopefully we'll get to see them against Greece and also hopefully against Ireland. In which case, suddenly, I don't know, there's a chance we might get something out of a game like that,
What happened in the other game? So they lost to Australia. What happened against Congo? The
The
Dr.
Congo
Congo.
game, yeah, against Dr. Congo, they drew 1-1. Chris
Right.
Wood
So
scored a 90th minute penalty, which I think he also won. A little bit of a soft penalty, but
yeah, who
you take
cares?
him how they come. And he doesn't miss penalties. For anyone who somehow hasn't realized this yet, Chris Wood doesn't miss penalties. He hasn't missed a penalty since I think longer ago than when Auckland City had last lost a game at Kiwatia Street, which is a record that has to be reset now because Wellington Olympic did the deed on Sunday.
So the All Whites pretty steady with Dr. Congo, not quite as good as Australia. I doubt they're as good as the Republic of Ireland. They're a pretty good footballing nation. Greece, shout out Wellington Olympic. Greece is pretty good at football, but I think there's a better chance of beating Greece than the Republic of Ireland. How's that for a gut hunch from outside of the footballing realms?
Well, I did see something about Ireland. If their manager doesn't get a result, probably not so much in the game against the All Whites, but a little bit more so in their next qualifiers for must be Euros. There's potential of sacking going on. There does seem to be a bit of pressure about form and results and stuff from the Irish football team. I'm curious about the behind closed doors thing with Greece as well. I don't know what that's about, but that doesn't exactly that sounds a little bit disruptive as well from their point of view. So I think the best way to put it with these two fixtures is basically that they're two. I think Greece and Ireland probably aren't that far apart. Stylistically, they might be, and it's hard to guess how that will show against the All Whites. Whether the All Whites might be just better suited to play against one or the other, but just as far as general where they sit in the footballing landscape for men's international footy, I would say the best way to put it is that these two teams are relatively similar. Neither of them are as good as Australia. Both of them are probably better than Congo. So it's somewhere in between what they had from the last window.
Another weekend of Wellington Phoenix football is ahead of us. We have the women. They take on Central Coast Mariners, an away game on Saturday and Saturday evening. And the men, they are hosting Melbourne City at the Mount Smart Stadium. That's a good one. Shout out to Wellington Phoenix playing at Mount Smart. I don't know, it just seems.
That'll be in 2 weeks though.
So
Weekend
no,
after this because of the international break.
right, so we've only got women's footy. How about that? Only women's footy, and to be honest, not mad at it because the Wellington Phoenix women are pretty fun to watch. They are third on the ladder, 3-1 record, taking on the Central Coast Mariners, who have 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss, and they are 6th on 4 points. Phoenix on 9 points. We've talked about what happened against Western United. We talked about it on Tuesday. We've covered a lot of Aotearoa footballing matters. We've touched on the talent of women's football rising up the ranks and all sorts of stuff. So make sure you check out the Tuesday podcast, the last podcast we did, to dive deeper into that. What are you looking for in this game against the Mariners? As far as like building on some good performances go, like you did highlight how Melbourne victory for the men, that was a step up game, like a nice little gauge of where the Wellington Phoenix are at. I reckon like the Mariners aren't one of the best teams in the Women's A-League, but it is an away game. And it is a game against a team that is in the middle of the table. So I would suggest that this is another little measurement game for the Wellington Phoenix women where they're away in Australia and they're playing a solid but beatable team. And it's one of those games where, unless it's a really stinky draw, you'll be probably okay with the draw. You'll be hoping for a win, but this is where we're going to learn about the grit, the mana, and the apparent flair of the Wellington Phoenix woman.
Yeah, and I think they can win this game. I'm relatively confident if they play the way they've played in the last few weeks and make the sort of improvements that they're building towards, which isn't necessarily things that they have to do better as much as it is just doing those better things for longer and being just yeah, being more consistently dominant throughout games where they've had spells in all of them. I said it the other day. I'll say it again. Like I don't think they've come anywhere close to putting a 90-minute performance together, and they've won 3 games in a row, which is not only the club's best ever win streak, it's their best ever undefeated streak. It's the first time they've even gone 3 games undefeated in a row. They had a couple of sort of win-draw combinations in the past, but they've never gone 3, let alone winning them all. So, and they scored multiple goals in all 3 of those games. Central Coast Mariners are an expansion team, so their home field advantage, there is home field advantage, but it's not like they've established a fortress or anything there. I think they might have even lost their previous home game. If I check the old, yeah, they lost to Newcastle Jets at home 1-0, who aren't a fantastic team. They beat Adelaide away 2-1, who were sort of also middling team, but a middling team with a couple Kiwis involved, so we want them to be better. And then they drew 1-1 with Brisbane Roar, who the Phoenix beat. That was also a home game for Central Coast. This is their 3rd home game in 5 weeks. They had a bye. I think they must have been one of the teams who were supposed to play Sydney FC, who have been doing Asian Champions League stuff. So there's been a couple of postponements where some teams haven't played as many as others. The Phoenix have played 4 games. Central Coast have played 3, and 3 of their 4 games will have been home games. I no New Zealanders involved for the Mariners, so there are a couple of ex-Phoenix players, though, I think. Who was it? There was Annabelle Martin, fullback for them, played a little bit in the first year for the Knicks, and Izzy Gomez, who is a sort of defensive midfielder, was with the Knicks for the first 2 seasons, but it was a bit injury struck last year, both Australians. I think this is a winnable game for the Knicks, even though it is away from home, and that is another test. That is another aspect that they have to sort of get through, and maybe they are due a down game as well. It might be one of those things. You haven't seen this level of consistency from them in the past in terms of results. Maybe that's something that might swing back around at some point. But frankly, the way they've been playing, if they do what they've been doing the last couple of games, I think they will beat Central Coast, whether it's the home or away. I don't see that as being one of their toughest fixtures. There will be, because they won away to Western Sydney as well, who are bottom of the table. Central Coast kind of mid-table at the moment. There will be tougher away trips, but so far I think the draw has been a bit fortunate in that they've played Melbourne City at home, they played Brisbane Roar at home. They played someone else in there as well. I can't remember. Western United at home. We'll see. Because actually, after this, they have 2 more home games. Looking at it, because the game that you mentioned at Mount Smart is actually double header. The Phoenix Blokes play Melbourne. Who'd you say Melbourne City? And then the women also on the same day play Perth Glory. And then I think that's a Saturday, and on the Sunday at the same venue is the National League Grand Finals, the men's and women's. I think also at Go Media Mount Smart, formerly known as Ericsson Stadium. I bring back Ericsson Stadium, I reckon. I'm confident about this game for the Wellington Phoenix women, and I don't know if I've ever said that before for an away game.
Yeah, you said, like, can the Phoenix do their thing, do their small ball, do their good footy for the full 90 minutes? I am thinking, like, can they do it away from home in Australia? I think that's another wrinkle to this game. Can you execute what you want to do, not only for 90 minutes, but also in Australia? Because that's what every New Zealand team competing in an Australian competition needs to do. The Warriors need to do their thing in Australia. The Breakers need to do their thing in Australia. The Phoenix need to do their thing in Australia as well. We also had some flying Kiwi shenanigans. We had, let me get this right, in England, we had Olivia Page winning a penalty, but she didn't take the penalty. And if she did take the penalty, she might have scored, but stopping the penalty was an Leat, Football Ferns goalkeeper. So we had a situation where Olivia Page won the penalty and Leat saved the penalty, which is the best case flying Kiwis situation. What teams were playing? and any more context around that?
Yeah, there's a bit of context to that because it was Annalise Aston Villa against Olivia Page's Sheffield United. Annalise's been with Villa for 2 seasons. She had a year with West Ham before that. Everyone knows who Annalise is. She's been one of our most promising footballers since the Under-17 World Cup a few years ago. Olivia Page also went to an Under-17 World Cup. She went to one last year. She is now 18 years old. She's from Eastern Suburbs, was part of their championship winning squad last season, has gone over to Sheffield United. So they're a second-tier team. Aston Villa are a Women's Super League team, first tier. So this was a League Cup group stage game, the Continental Tires Cup, I think it's known as the Conti Cup. And it's an opportunity for both teams to give some of their backups an opportunity. And Leat is the backup goalkeeper for Villa, and she'd been sitting watching as they lost 5 games in a row to start their league season because they signed the Dutch number one, who wasn't playing like a Dutch number one in some of those games. Their most recent game before this was a 6-0 loss to Chelsea. So Anna Leat's sitting there watching that, finally gets a chance when the first Continental when the first Conti Cup game comes along, keeps a clean sheet, saves a penalty with what was actually the last play of the game. Like, she saved the penalty, the rebound gets put into the side netting from close range, and the final whistle goes. That's how it ended. They won 5-0, so it wasn't a game in the balance or anything like that. It was very much an opportunity for a consolation goal. Olivia Page is in a similar situation to Anna Leat, but a few years earlier in her career sort of prospects. She is played as a defensive midfielder in this game. That was her second appearance for Sheffield United. She also hasn't played yet in the league. I think she's been on the bench 6 times, hasn't actually got out there yet, but has played in both their League Cup games so far. So she started this one, she came off the bench, a late sub, but came on and won a penalty. That's what you got to do, have an impact as a substitution. That's how you earn further opportunities. And yeah, like you said, that was kind of the best case scenario. Is Liv Page gets to do something cool and improve her stocks for the Sheffield United coaches, and Anna Leat gets to do something cool that improves her stocks for the Aston Villa coaches and gets her more opportunities down the line to make sure these things keep coming around for her. So that's how we want it to go. It's not the only Flying Kiwis derby of the weekend though, because there was a game where think HB Køge in Denmark beat FC Nordsjælland 1-0. And Nordsjælland had just gone top of the table the previous round, overtaking Køge. Malia Steinmetz, I think that might have been the game where she set up the clinching goal. I think they won 2-0 and she set up the second goal. The great through ball from midfield after winning possession around halfway, which is just like prime Malia Steinmetz areas. She's played, I think, 90 minutes in the game against Køge. Køge is the club that Claudia Bunge and Daisy Cleverley play for. Bunge is injured at the moment, so that's something to keep an eye on with the Football Ferns squad upcoming. She's missed their last 2 or 3 games and didn't play in this one, unfortunately. But Daisy Cleverley did. Daisy Cleverley got a sort of quarter of an hour off the bench as her team won, went back top of the table. So there's a bit of a back and forth going on there between 3 New Zealanders, one club with 1 Kiwi and one club with 2 Kiwis. Just leapfrogging each other back and forth in the Danish Kvinderliga, I think it's called, as the women's competition. And we might have another one of theirs coming up this week as well, because I think Vic Essen's Rangers plays against Michaela Moore's Glasgow City. Don't know if Essen will play that, though. Moore definitely will, because she's in triumphant form at the moment, and would be thinking, if she doesn't get a recall to the Football Ferns for the next squad on the back of making multiple Team of the Weeks for Glasgow City and Scotland, something's fishy in that situation if that doesn't happen.
You can now set the scene for the National League games coming up this weekend. Big weekend of National League football. I believe it's the last round of National League before finals get underway. Do your I don't have any other examples, but the old Matt Nable or Phil Gould Fox NRL, how
I need the dramatic background music or something.
Yeah, don't do that. Those are shitty examples. But set the scene for us. Lay the context down. Tell us why this is a massive weekend of National League football.
Well, in the men's, it kind of isn't a massive weekend of National League football because we know who's going to finish last. We know who's going to finish first and second, and it doesn't matter in what order because there's no home field advantage for finals at a neutral venue, although it's a neutral venue in Auckland, so it probably suits Auckland City a little bit more than Wellington Olympic. But who cares? You know, Olympic want to be the underdogs in that contest, and they just beat Auckland City last week. So I think the most exciting aspect of the final round of the men's competition is the Golden Boot race because you got Garvin Coughlin for Cashmere Technical. They are away to Eastern Suburbs. Eastern Suburbs been really good lately. They're scoring a lot of goals and they've not been conceding too many either. They won 5-0 against Napier on the weekend. Coughlin has 10 goals. He has scored consecutive hat-tricks. He's just coming off a game in which he scored a hat-trick and set up the other goal in a 4-2 win over Christchurch United in the big South Island. I was going to say Christchurch derby, Canterbury derby, South Island derby. All of those things applied because they're the only two teams from the South Island. He's playing just outstanding football. He's incredible. But also Gianni Bazoukas is hanging pretty tight as well. And there was a goal he scored on the weekend, which was given as an own goal initially and then got overturned and recredited to him, which means Coughlin's on 10 goals. Bazoukas is on 9. He's not far behind. And Olympic have a much more favorable final game. They're at home against the Wellington Phoenix Reserves. I could see who, by the way, the Phoenix Reserves shipping a lot of goals lately. They have won 2 games in a row, but I think they've won like 4-3 and 3-2 or something like that. They have been leaking goals. And I could certainly see Bazooka scoring a heady in that one to come forward and claim the golden boot. So I think old mate Garbs is going to have to do some work for Kashi Tech as well if he wants to hang on there. Women's competition, we don't have to be so frivolous or trivial about individual goal scorers or anything, although there is still a bit of a battle there for top scorer. I think Sophia Garcia is on 8, and then you got Charlotte Lancaster, Pippi Oliver Bell, Kaylee Ward all on 7, and frankly, Amy Hislop, Ella McCann on 6, not out of the question either. But bigger picture there is we already know who's going to finish first, second, and last in the men's competition. We have no idea how that's going to work in the women's competition, which means almost every game has something riding on it, because the top 4 teams are still in contention to make the final, and the bottom 3 teams could all still finish last. There's one point that separates Phoenix Reserve, Central Football, and Ellerslie at the bottom. There's 3 points that separate Auckland United, Southern United, Eastern Suburbs, Western Springs at the top. Auckland United, Southern United, if they win, they're in. They have a point advantage over anyone else. Southern United play Ellerslie, who are last, so you'd back them to do the deed there, although Ellerslie did beat the top place team last week. They just upset Eastern Suburbs and put their title defense in all sorts of chaos. Then who is the other team there? Auckland United are away to Wellington United, which is not an easy game, particularly if you're playing them in Wellington. Wellington United start games very well and they end games very well. So you got to be careful that you don't find yourself in a deficit, and you also got to be careful that your lead is safe towards the end. But Auckland United, highest performing defensive unit at the moment. Like they don't look like they can. They don't look like they're going to concede multiple goals. They look very good, and I sort of expect them to probably win that game, Southern to win that game, and then there's your 2 finalists right there. But if either of those teams do slip up, then you've got Eastern Suburbs would need to go to out into Canterbury and get a win, and then they would get that opportunity. If they also fail, then Western Springs come back into the mix if they can beat Waterside Karori. That is in Auckland. That's the Springs home game. And then the other game of the round, Phoenix Reserves versus Central Football, well, that's 8th versus 9th. So if Ellerslie gets something off of Southern, then suddenly Phoenix and Central are battling out to avoid the wooden spoon, which for Central is a big deal because after beating Ellerslie a couple of weeks ago, it looked like they were finally going to avoid it for the first time since I think it was 2018. Like I think they've had about 4 or 5 wooden spoons in a row. This is just an every year thing for them. Finally, and what might be their last season of existence. We don't really know how the league's going to look next year with these federation teams. Got a great opportunity to not come last, but it's not done yet. If they can get a result off the Phoenix Reserve, if they can get a win against the Phoenix Reserves, then it's guaranteed. If they get a draw, they should be okay. If they lose, they should probably be okay as well, as long as Southern defeat Ellerslie. But that's the final round of the women's competition. The men's has nothing but mid-table placings up for grabs and some individual prizes, of course. The women's, every single game has something riding on it for for either top two or wooden spoon.
What is the football equivalent of the extras? Like lose the game but win the extras battle? Is there a something in football?
Yeah, I mean, you could make a case for XG. We're saying, oh well, we lost, but we had a better XG, so we should have won. Like we created enough chances to win. We were just unlucky. That's a possibility. I think shot counts in general. That's related to XG because that's how they tally out the XG is how good each shot was. But these shot counts as well. I see a lot of that at the moment. A lot of shot count talk because I think there was a game at the under-17 World Cup where Brazil played New Caledonia and New Caledonia won. New Caledonia did not win. Brazil won by I don't know, but the kind of score that would have lost count. I think it was like 12-0 or something. They had, depending on where you look, somewhere between like 75 and 85 shots in that game, which is disgusting. Like if you have 30 shots in a game, that's an enormous amount. Brazil had 70 to 80 plus, and then New Caledonia had about 4. And then also there was that game for the Wellington Phoenix, the blokes drawing with Melbourne Victory with 0 shots, and yet somehow getting a 1-1 draw because it was an own goal. I think shot counts are very overrated, personally. I think there's the difference between just tallying up shots and good shots. Like there's a difference in the fact that there is that kind of XG differential in the first place tells you that not all shots are made equal. So not all shot counts are equal as well. But I do think that is one of those ones that maybe that applies to.
That is the niche cast for this Thursday. Next week, whole fresh delivery of podcast coming your way. Otherwise, stay tuned. Friday news that will be coming out. The niche-cage.com is your home for Aotearoa sporting deep dives. Big up yourself, love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, chur chur.